precious lives are lost. Why should this happen? This is totally avoidable. And we must make sure that through the children, we reach out to them. Similarly, LPG linked explosions. It happens because we are careless. And it's a child who would be able to teach his family. And these can be brought out through mock drills. Similarly, there are certain activities that a child after a certain age, maybe a child who is 12, 13, 14 plus, should be taught. These are first, simple first aid. I think first aid is so simple actually that one need not go into anything complicated, and a child would do it much, once he knows it, he would be doing it much, much better. You have seen how children love to play with dolls and pretend they are doctors. You see, it comes naturally to human nature to tie a bandage, to make sure that in case there is a fracture, arm broken, what is to be done, how to tie it. You know, these are simple things that can be taught to the children after a certain age. Similarly, swimming. I remember, I don't know, Dr. Rajneesh, if it's still there or not, but at one point of time in Kerala, I think with NIDM support, we were planning to have special classes on swimming every summer vacation for all the children. And our plan was to cover every child in the state. I don't know where we have reached now. We had done some bit, but I think in our country, we need to do that. Every child should know how to swim because that is extremely important. I also now mention a couple of things. I think I've spoken a lot, but I'll mention a couple of things. One is every school should have a DM plan. And it should not be something very exotic and esoteric. It should be something very simple. In case of a disaster, what should happen? Kahan pe collect karna hoga? Where should the child, how the children should queue up and in a line should, in a disciplined way, move out of the class and gather at some place, which is the collection point. It will be ensured that in case there is even a major disaster, let's say, due to an earthquake, there's a building collapse, what should be the first priority? These are the simple things that should be part of the disaster plan. It should also have the do's and don'ts, what a child should do, what a teacher should do. At the same time, I think it's also essential that every school should have some basic equipments. I think many of our schools do not have that. They need to have fire extinguisher. They need to be aware as to what to do in case there is any building damage or collapse. They should be also aware as to how to deal with any other eventuality. I think these are the things that the basic equipment in case of a power outage. There should be a battery operated light, for instance. These are some simple things that should be there. And who should keep this? They should be kept with the coordinator of disaster management, which every school should have. Every school should have a coordinator of disaster management who should be responsible to have these equipments so that when the time comes, he or she will bring these out and use them. He or she will be responsible to make sure that these are kept properly charged in a manner that it is accessible easily in case of a disaster. I think apart from this, I think already in schools and colleges, I think many of the schools and colleges have already set up their what they call the task forces. That is extremely important. We started in Kerala and it was very, very useful. So a task force, for instance, of health and safety, a task force that will be responsible for first aid, a task force for ensuring regular mock drills, a task force for environment to ensure that the children learn to plant trees and keep their surroundings clean. This is something that we have learned more during the pandemic. How important it is to make sure that we keep our surroundings clean. We make it a habit to keep ourselves clean because wellness comes from that. There is nothing more important than good health. We have all learned that at a very high cost, but we have learned it. And we must make sure that our children get that imbibed within them. So apart from the DM coordinator, I think every school should also have what I like to call counselors. Because disaster is not just the physical part of it or the physical disasters or natural disasters alone. There are also anthropogenic disasters, the disasters that are created by man, traffic disasters, as was being mentioned by, I think, Dr. Swati, about the trauma that a child faces in the face of a disaster, harassment in school. Uh, there can be so many things that happen in school, which a child should be able to go to the counselors and share with them, talk to them. It's so important that there is an avenue for expressing that fear or that trauma that a child faces. And that is especially important because as a child, I know how children can be extremely inward bound. They would not like to share unless they feel confident that they're sharing it with someone who is reliable. And therefore, these counselors have to be people who understand kids, understand psychology, and are able to uh, provide the necessary cure or the necessary the support that the child needs. Finally, I think something that in our society, that's something which our teachers, and I cannot but say this because I have got you the teachers as my captive audience now, and I have to share this with you. You teachers, I'm addressing you directly now. You play such an important role in our lives, and something that is very important for our children to learn is understanding. Just as they need to be aware and knowledgeable, they also need to be understanding. They need to be sympathetic. They also need to be sensitive. We need to bring up a society where a child does not turn his face away when he sees somebody in pain. A child who does not ignore somebody's illness or sickness or problem, but a child who is willing to offer a helping hand. I think that is the kind of a child, uh, a society that we are thinking of. And who can do this? The children, who are our future generation. And this, I think, can come only if the teachers are able to communicate with the children and make them understand. There is also this very good word I always often use. I don't know how ill-used it is, but the word empathy. Every child should be able to understand the other person's problem, not just through simple sympathy, but also through empathy. Empathy is basically the ability to be able to put oneself into the other person's shoes. If I were there, if I had faced this kind of a problem, what would happen to me? And therefore, my heart goes out and I would like to help the person. That is empathy. And that empathy, unfortunately, gets lost somewhere in our society because children are so busy with so many other things. Teachers keep them busy, parents keep them busy, they themselves are busy with so many other things. Therefore, we need to develop that empathy in such a manner. And if it is done now, the children would get it for life. They would have it for life, and that would never go from them. So it would become a reflex. That is very important. And most important, the teacher should understand that this is something which is not a routinized work. This is not something that will, um, you know, uh, char classes padha diya, khatam ho gaya. It is not that. The test of your real teaching, your having learned this data, this information, this knowledge, and shared with the children, the real test will come when a child actually faces a disaster situation. How does a child respond? And that is when you will be tested, mind you. And therefore, whenever you're teaching a child, you should make sure that the child does it, learns it, and also knows how to respond in case he faces such a problem. I think I've spoken a lot, Dr. Mukta. I don't think you were expecting me to speak so much, but I get carried away. And I could not lose this opportunity where I have got this set of teachers, the most important group of people in our society. So good luck to all of you. Take back from this course 3 days of learning as much information, as much data as you want. And at every point when you are sitting through these sessions, note down how you can best share it with your children, with your students, with your pupils. That would be the best impact of this training program. So good luck to all of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful insight. I'm really thankful to you. And yeah, whatever time you want, you can continue. But yeah, it's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting the importance of having disaster management plan and task force for the school safety. We value your insights. And now to talk on the basic concept of disaster management and institutional mechanism of India, I would like to invite Dr. Mukta Girdhar, Founder Director, Disaster Resilient and Research Foundation. Dr. Mukta has more than 24 years of experience in imparting education in the field of disaster management and GIS. She is a chief editor of quarterly publication. She has been awarded with Women Empowerment Leadership Award in Disaster Management. She has guided and presented more than 40 plus research papers in peer-reviewed journals. I request you, ma'am, to share your views. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nishi, for such a wonderful introduction. And I would request you all, please be here for all the 3 days. You will get only a certificate when you will attend 80% of this training. Then you are eligible for the certificate. So now, just I would like to discuss on my topic. My topic is basic concept and institutional mechanism of disaster management. Give me 2 minutes. I'll share my presentation. Ananya, मैं share नहीं कर, I'm not been able to. I'm getting some issues by sharing my presentation, but by the time, just I would like to continue with my discussion that as the topic is institutional mechanism and what are the policies are available in India. So just I would like to describe from the tsunami which hit in the year of 2004 in tsunami in India, not only the India, but all over the South Asian country. That was the time when in the single night, near about 2.5 lakhs people, they have died. Not only the people, but lot of infrastructure और बहुत सारा building सब कुछ collapse हो गया था. Or that was the time that India government really shook and they thought some steps they need to take. And then they have started a ministry. And after that, they have been created National Disaster Management Authority. This authority is the apex body. Honorable Prime Minister is a chairperson of this NDMA, and people who are living in Delhi, they might be aware that blue color of building just adjacent to AIMS, that is known as NDMA. Honorable Prime Minister has a right to appoint their members, and members are responsible to prepare their guidelines, policy, awareness issue, and everything which is through which they can generate the capacity development. Then there is a National Institute of Disaster Management, and this is the institute with the help, they are responsible to create awareness all over the India to all the people, but I think only one institute is not been enough to provide training to all, as you know that just a second, there is some issue. I will log in from my system. Another system. My screen is visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Please.
I'm sorry for the interruption, but yeah, again, it is a technical glitch. So, yeah, as per the presentation, I have to explain that what is a disaster. Disaster is something mishappened, which anything mishappening which we are not being able to cope up with our strength, with our capacity. For example, we have faced in Kedarnath glacial outburst recently in Chamoli, COVID. अगर आप मुंबई पूना की तरफ जाते हो तो हमने निसर्ग और साइक्लोन फेस किया है, और जब ऐसे डिजास्टर्स को संभालने के लिए हमको बहुत सारे रिसोर्सेज की जरूरत पड़ती है और बहुत सारे लोगों की जरूरत पड़ती है जो हमसे नहीं संभलता, और बहुत बारी ऐसा होता है कि हमको दूसरे कंट्री की भी जरूरत पड़ती है, तो ऐसे सिचुएशन को हम डिजास्टर कहते हैं. नाउ द सेकेंड पॉइंट इज व्हाट इज डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट. Disaster management is a a management of that disaster where we need n number of people. तो इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें इन्वॉल्व होती हैं, जैसे अगर कोई सफर कर रहा है तो उसको डॉक्टर के पास ले जाना है, वहां पर उसको फर्स्ट एड देना है, लोगों के घर खराब हो जाते हैं तो वी नीड for them shelter, food, drinking water. So provide everything and managing everything. Start from their water to livelihood to reconstruction and rehabilitation. All this management is called disaster management. So now the other very important aspect is risk. Most of the time we said in this COVID scenario that please don't go out, there is a risk. Don't expose yourself to a crowded place, there is a risk. So if you see in this image, there is a triangle, and in this triangle, if you expose, there is a hazard and there is a vulnerability. Any triangle will increase, risk will increase. If you want to reduce the risk, we have to reduce one side. Or we eliminate one side, risk will absolutely finish. The third is disaster management cycle. The whole world that is working on the base of this model. So what is this model? In this model, there is basically a three concept. We have to work, or you can say that we have to work on the three sectors. The sector one, when immediately disaster struck, what are the immediate needs, then after certain time what requirement to the community, and in the peacetime. In the peacetime, we have to prepare ourselves to face the disaster. We have to increase the capacity. We have to increase our strength so that we should minimize the effect of any disaster. So if you can see here, there are so many aspects which is there, but in the inner circle, there is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So above, there is a land use planning. Just I wanted to give you one example that recently we have faced Kerala flood, Jammu Kashmir flood, and it was really surprising how these places they can face flood type of situation. The result is that people they were not aware, and they are constructing houses in the just side bank of the river. So there is no place where rivers should go when there is a heavy recharge of water. And then it has been blocked, and because that has been supported by lot of factors, we face flood. So we have to carefully plan how to land use. In the land, there should be a proper system through that water should recharge. I request to please mute. Someone is unmuted. So technical prevention. Technical prevention, you can say that when the tsunami was struck, that time we were not aware, we don't have any warning systems. We are totally dependent on the satellite system of US NASA. But after that, we have developed a lot. Nowadays, at present, all over the coastline, we have warning system. There is a one buoy, you can say the sensor, which has been inside the ocean. They just sense something, anything happen in the base of the ocean, they immediately transform those sensation to a receiver, and through the receiver it goes on to the satellite, and from the satellite it reaches on the again on the center where ISRO centers, and they analyze and just send the information to Indian Meteorological Department, and these department they just immediately disseminate all the information to community, and community get alert within few minutes. So from there to this, we have reached very long. Earlier in 1990, when Orissa super cyclone was happened, that was the time we have lost so many lives. But nowadays, when there is a Fani, Nisak, Taukate, we have only 5 to 6 human laws. Though we are not being able to control environmental laws and human laws, infrastructural laws, but we have completely able to control human laws. We evacuated not only the human, but we are also evacuating animals also. And if you see in 1999 in Orissa super cyclone, that was the time when the same river, same flooding water, animal and human body, both were floating. There were no drinking water and lot of waterborne disease. People have been suffered from the waterborne disease. So we are developing in the technical sides, then the capacity building. Government is really taking initiative for the capacity building. You can say the capacity building with the two respect. One is training human, training school children's, training colleges, provide training to colleges. Nowadays, 11th and 12th, it is very, one subject is compulsory in disaster management, and UGC also they have made mandatory that every student who is doing, whether he is doing graduation or post graduation, they have to learn one subject as in disaster management. Only they can then only they will be able to take their degrees, whether it is graduation or in master's degree. Apart from that, there is a lot of one week training courses are conducted by the NIDM. For example, we are sensitizing people, and every department it is mandatory that they should learn such type of disaster. Then emergency planning. Emergency planning, it means every department, every school, every hospital, they have to have a disaster management plan. As Navidita ma'am, she told that disaster management plan has to be a mandatory. It should not be very heavy. It has to be very handy that any layman can learn, can read, and can direction from their disaster management plan, and they can act as per the time of emergency. There is another emergency planning, as you have heard that most of the time in when we are facing third wave, Arvind Kejriwal, I'm talking about Delhi. Arvind Kejriwal, he used to say that we have a buffer of 3 months medicine. We have enough staff of hospitals. We have hospitals with so many beds. So that is called emergency planning. Then the monitoring. Monitoring, just I wanted to tell you, monitoring means if there is, if you look at the Indian Meteorological Department, they are continuously watching the weather. They forecasting weather. If you compare today to last 10 years, 10 साल पहले जो भी forecasting होती थी वो सही नहीं होती थी, पर आज की डेट में IMD जो फोरकास्ट करता है वो एग्जैक्ट होती है. थोड़ा बहुत 95 to 100 के बीच में वेरिएशन होता है, अदरवाइज वो बिल्कुल परफेक्ट होती है. द सेम वे जो मॉनिटरिंग हो रही है कोविड पे, उस पे भी आप देख सकते हैं डेली केसेस आते हैं कि कितने लोग इन्फेक्टेड हुए, कितने टोटल कितने हैं, कितने रिकवर हो गए. तो इस तरह की जो एक्टिविटीज होती है वो मॉनिटरिंग में आती है. आप जैसे हम देख रहे हैं कि अब केसेस जो है धीरे धीरे कम हो रहे हैं, तो ये मॉनिटरिंग से ही हमें पता चलता है कि हाँ यहाँ पे केसेस कम हो रहे हैं, एंड इट्स समवेयर इट्स गिव्स अ सेंस ऑफ रिलीफ. फिर उसके बाद यहाँ पे कि अगर ये सारी जो तैयारियां हमें करनी होती हैं, जैसे मैंने बताया, लैंड यूज प्लानिंग, टेक्निकल कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग, इमरजेंसी प्लानिंग, मॉनिटरिंग, ये सब हम करते हैं पीस टाइम पे. और उसके बाद जब आप डिजास्टर स्ट्रक हो जाता है, तो उस समय हमारा जो एक्शन होता है वो होता है रिस्पॉन्स का. जो लोग उससे अफेक्टेड हैं उनको इमीडिएटली रिलीफ पहुंचाया जाए, इमीडिएटली उनको फूड, वाटर, मेडिसिन, सारी चीजें प्रोवाइड की जाए. अगर गवर्नमेंट को कोई फंड देना है तो पहले जाती है डैमेज असेसमेंट करवाती है कि भाई इतना पर्टिकुलर प्लेस पे लॉस हुआ है, उसका ये इवेल्युएशन है एंड दिस मच अमाउंट they need. If government has money, they can provide. If government think they need some extra support, then they can look for the support to other developed countries. So इसमें ये है कि अब गवर्नमेंट, इंडियन गवर्नमेंट दूसरी कंट्री से कैसे सपोर्ट मांगेगी, तो उसके लिए एक सेंडेई फ्रेमवर्क है, या उसके पहले सारे वर्ल्ड लीडर्स वो वापस एक जगह पे आते हैं एंड दे डू द मीटिंग और दे साइन द ट्रीटी, जैसे अभी क्लाइमेट चेंज का चल रहा है उसके पहले, तो उसमें वो साइन करते हैं कि अगर किसी डेवलपिंग कंट्री को या किसी कंट्री को सपोर्ट की जरूरत हुई तो दूसरी कंट्री ऑन ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ग्राउंड आगे आएगी और वो सपोर्ट करेगी। तो अगर हमारे देश को या किसी भी देश को ऐसा लगता है कि नहीं वो नहीं कोप अप कर सकते हैं तो दे कैन आस्क फॉर सम हेल्प। जैसे आपने देखा हो कि इंडिया के पास वैक्सीन थी तो इंडिया ने वैक्सीन दूसरी कंट्री को प्रोवाइड की है। एट द सेम टाइम उन्होंने कोशिश की कि हम इंडियन सिटीजन भी वैक्सीनेट हो और दूसरी कंट्री के लोग भी वैक्सीनेट हो। तो ये सारा जो एक्ट होता है या एक्शन होता है वो एक ट्रीटी के अंदर होता है एंड इट इज मैंडेटरी दैट एवरी कंट्री हैज टू बी फॉर एक्ट बेस्ड ऑन दोस ट्रीटी। उस ट्रीटी में ही एक और ट्रीटी हमारे ऑनरेबल प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने साइन की थी, उसके हिसाब से एक सारी जगह उन्होंने कहा था कि वी विल ट्राई टू रिड्यूस कार्बन इमिशन, क्लाइमेट चेंज, क्योंकि क्लाइमेट चेंज को भी माना जाता है कि वो कहीं ना कहीं डिजास्टर को सपोर्ट करता है। और दूसरा उन्होंने ये कहा था कि हम अपनी कैपेसिटी को इन टर्म्स ऑफ इक्विपमेंट, इन टर्म्स ऑफ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और इन टर्म्स ऑफ अवेयरनेस हम इसको आगे बढ़ाएंगे या स्ट्रेंथन करेंगे। तो ऐसी बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स हैं जो गवर्नमेंट ने लिए हैं और गवर्नमेंट ले रही है। देन आता है रिहेबिलिटेशन। जब कोई डिजास्टर हो जाता है और उसको हमने जो इमीडिएट रिक्वायरमेंट है वो तो यही है कि उसको फर्स्ट एड मिलना चाहिए, उसको रोटी कपड़ा और मकान मिलना चाहिए, उसका लाइवलीहुड अगर कहीं खत्म हो गया है तो उसको के लाइवलीहुड को रीस्टेब्लिश किया जाए। फॉर एग्जाम्पल जब सुनामी हुआ था तो उस समय जब वाटर वापस रिसीड हो गया उस समय भी आफ्टर 9 या 10 डेज कंडीशन ऐसी थी कि पानी में सब फ्लोट हो रहा है, सेम वाटर, एनिमल बॉडी, ह्यूमन बॉडी, कचरा, सारा ड्रेनेज का, एवरीथिंग इज मिक्स, नोबडी कैन ड्रिंक वाटर। और वो इतना ज्यादा रिमोट एरिया में उसका इफेक्ट था कि गवर्नमेंट चाह के भी उनके पास सप्लाई नहीं पहुंचा पा रही थी, क्योंकि कहीं पे रोड ब्रेक था, कहीं पे हेलीकॉप्टर से वो प्रॉपर उनको नहीं पहुंचा पा रहे थे या प्रॉपर प्लेस में उसको ड्रॉप इन नहीं कर पा रहे थे। तो उस समय जो सारी जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी उस डिजास्टर को मैनेज करने के लिए, वो जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी वो वहाँ के कलेक्टर, छोटी जो विलेजेस होते हैं उसमें कलेक्टर के ऊपर ही जिम्मेदारी आती है। तो मैंने किसी एक कलेक्टर का पढ़ा था, प्रेजेंटेशन देखा था, उसमें उन्होंने ये बताया था कि मेरे पास नियर अबाउट 200 डेड बॉडीज थी और मेरे को पता नहीं है किसका नाम क्या है, कौन किस घर से बिलोंग करता है और किस तरह से है। तो व्हाट ही डिड, वो बहुत दिन तक नहीं रख सकते उस डेड बॉडी को क्योंकि सब तरफ पानी है और उस बॉडी को हम क्रीमेट भी नहीं कर सकते। तो उन्होंने क्या किया, उन्होंने सिंपल उसमें मार्किंग करी 1 2 3 4 5 6, उसकी फोटो खींची और उसको स्टोर कर लिया, सो दैट अगर उनके नियर और डियर वन आते हैं तो एटलीस्ट वो उनको इतनी तो इन्फॉर्मेशन दे सके कि यस we have cremated this much peoples in these peoples। और उसके बाद उन्होंने सारे लोगों का विदाउट नोइंग देयर रिलीजन एंड कॉज दे ऑल हैव बीन गॉन फॉर द बरियल, और एक साथ बहुत बड़ा गड्ढा खोदा और 200-250 लोग को उस पर बरी कर दिया। सो ही सेड मेरे पास कोई और ऑप्शन था ही नहीं तो जो लोग बचे थे मैं उनको और ज्यादा नुकसान पहुंचा देता। तो ये सारी चीजें जो है वो मैनेजमेंट में आती है जो कि क्विकली उसी समय विद इन अ वीक या विद इन अ 15 डेज हमें प्रोवाइड करनी होती है। लेकिन उसके बाद भी जो डिजास्टर के इफेक्ट्स होते हैं वो चलते रहते हैं। ऐसा नहीं कि डिजास्टर हुआ हम भूल जाते हैं यहाँ दूर से बैठे, पर जिन्होंने डिजास्टर को फेस किया है इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर देम टू कम बैक टू द नॉर्मल सिचुएशन। तो उनको नॉर्मल में लाना भी एक बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेदारी है। तो उनको नॉर्मैलिटी में हम कैसे लाएंगे? उसके लिए ये है कि जैसे सपोज कहीं पे अर्थक्वेक हो गया, जब भुज का अर्थक्वेक हुआ तो बहुत सारे विलेजेस ऐसे थे जो पूरा का पूरा उनका विलेज का विलेज पूरा फ्लैट हो गया था। तो उसमें फिर गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव्स लेती हैं, वो उनको छोटे छोटे घर बना के देती है विद फुल फैसिलिटी। जहाँ सुनामी अफेक्टेड लोग थे उनको फिशिंग बोट इस तरह से दिए जो कि फुली इक्विप थे, जीपीएस इनेबल्ड थे विद द प्रॉपर फिशिंग नेट, और जिससे कि वो बहुत ज्यादा फिशिंग कर सकते थे। जब उन्होंने ज्यादा फिशिंग करने लगे तो लोगों ने, गवर्नमेंट ने इनिशिएटिव लिया कि अब इस फिश को एक्सपोर्ट किया जाए, फिर उसके लिए उनको फैसिलिटेट किया। तो इस तरह से उनको दोबारा से रिहैबिलिटेट करने के लिए भी प्लानिंग्स होती हैं, जो कि आफ्टर सर्टेन टाइम, यू कैन से द 3 or 4 month आफ्टर द डिजास्टर, इस तरह के इनिशिएटिव्स लिए जाते हैं। और फिर पुराने जो टूटे हुए घर हैं उनको दोबारा से रिकंस्ट्रक्ट करना, उसके लिए एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक या वर्ल्ड डेवलपमेंट बैंक ये सारी चीजें उसको सपोर्ट करती हैं। सो दैट ऑल दिस साइकिल दैट इज कॉल्ड डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट साइकिल. So that is the pre-stage, during the stage and the post-disaster phase. Basically जो मेन स्टेप है उसमें ये है कि स्टेप टू बी टेकन ड्यूरिंग द डिजास्टर. ड्यूरिंग द डिजास्टर अगर आप स्टेप्स लेते हैं तो आपको किस तरह से, कहाँ पे इवैक्यूएट करना है, कहाँ पे रिलीफ कैंप बनाना है, कहाँ पर मॉनिटरिंग एंड रिपोर्टिंग करनी है, अगर वीआईपी विजिट करने के लिए आते हैं तो कैसे उनको दिखाना है, सो दैट दे कैन सी एंड दे कैन अंडरस्टैंड द सिचुएशन क्विकली. Steps to be taken after disaster. The main issues are disposal of dead bodies, cleaning of debris, disbursement of relief. क्योंकि कई बार ऐसा होता है, आप लोगों ने भी सुना होगा कि जब केदारनाथ में और ग्लेशियर केदारनाथ में जो फ्लड आया था तो काफी लोगों ने यहाँ से रिलीफ भेजा, पर वो रिलीफ था वो देहरादून में जाके स्ट्रक हो गया और वो आगे तक जो लोगों को, जिनको जरूरत थी वहां तक वो पहुंच ही नहीं पाया था. तो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट रिलीफ मटेरियल हैज टू बी रीच टू अ नीडी पीपल. Then the third one is closure of relief camp, restoration of infrastructure, recognition of good work and the feedback. So then नॉर्मली ये कहा जाता है कि जब डिजास्टर आता है उसके बाद जो डैमेज होता है या डिस्ट्रक्शंस होता है, उसके बाद जो चीजें दोबारा से रीस्टेब्लिश होती हैं तो वो शायद कहीं ना कहीं एक डेवलपमेंट का हमें इंडिकेशन देती है. तो दैट इज व्हाई देयर इज अ स्लोगन दैट डिजास्टर्स आर टू बिल्ड बैक बेटर. So the during preparedness, these are some points which are very, very important to plan how to prepare emergency exercise. We have to work on the warning system, emergency communication systems. इसका एक recent example मैं आप लोगों के साथ share करना चाहूंगी. अभी जब यहाँ पर बॉम्बे कोस्ट में जब निसर्ग साइक्लोन आया था, that was the time that we are facing COVID also. तो कोविड में उस समय सेकेंड वेव चल रही थी और मुंबई पूना साइड में टेम्परेरी हॉस्पिटल्स बनाए गए थे और उस टेम्परेरी हॉस्पिटल के अंदर जो पेशेंट थे वो कुछ आईसीयू में थे. उसी समय वार्निंग आ गया कि भाई अब यहाँ पर साइक्लोन आने वाला है. तो वो क्या करे, तो वो सारे लोगों को बहुत सेफली इवेक्यूएट किया गया परमानेंट या गुड कंक्रीट हॉस्पिटल्स पे. पर फिर भी कुछ विलेज ऐसे थे जहां पर ये फैसिलिटी नहीं थी और कुछ पेशेंट ऐसे थे कि उनको सर्जरी या कुछ इमीडिएट इसकी सर्जरी की रिक्वायरमेंट थी. उसी समय साइक्लोन स्ट्रक हो गया, सारा कम्युनिकेशन चैनल ब्लॉक हो गया, क्योंकि जो भी कम्युनिकेशन होता है कोविड टाइम में मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम थ्रू इंटरनेट या थ्रू टेलीफोन होता है. तो नो टेलीफोन, नो इंटरनेट. And there is a procedure. If you have to go for the surgery, you have to take permission from their near and dear ones. तो जो डॉक्टर्स थे वो बहुत परेशान हो गए एंड दे टेक डिसीजन ऑन देयर ओन एंड दे गो फॉर द सर्जरी। तो ऐसे डिफिकल्ट सिनेरियो थे, तो दैट इज व्हाई इट इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट वी हैव टू वर्क ऑन द कम्युनिकेशन सिस्टम. Communication should not be blocked, at least in case of disaster. Then the resource inventory. Resource inventory is again very very important. सारे विलेज को या इनफैक्ट अगर आप इंडिविजुअल भी देखते हो तो हमें पता होना चाहिए कि हमारे आसपास क्या रिसोर्सेस है, कौन सा हॉस्पिटल हमारे घर के पास है, उस हॉस्पिटल का नंबर क्या है, हमारे पास अगर कोई इमरजेंसी तो कौन सा एम्बुलेंस हमारे पास आ सकता है, उसका नंबर क्या है, नियरेस्ट फायर स्टेशन क्या है। और अगर आप विलेज लेवल पे देखें तो विलेज को ये पता होना चाहिए कि मेरे विलेज की पॉपुलेशन ये है, इतनी पॉपुलेशन में इतने लोग वल्नरेबल कंडीशन में रहते हैं, और इतने अगर वल्नरेबल हैं और इन केस ऑफ डिजास्टर इतने अफेक्टेड हो गए तो क्या उनको कैटर करने के लिए मेरे पास पर्याप्त संसाधन है, इनफ रिसोर्सेस हैं? इफ नॉट देन दे हैव टू डेवलप दोज रिसोर्सेस इन टर्म्स ऑफ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। हॉस्पिटल नहीं है तो हॉस्पिटल बनवाए जाए, उसके अंदर इक्विपमेंट्स नहीं है तो इक्विपमेंट्स आओ, स्टाफ लाओ, काफी लोगों के साथ एनजीओस के साथ आप टाई अप करो सो दैट शेल्टर शुड बी देयर, अरेंजमेंट ऑफ फूड शुड बी देयर, सो दैट जो इमरजेंसी सिनेरियो है वो स्मूथली निकल आए। तो लॉट ऑफ एजेंसीज एंड लॉट ऑफ यून ऑर्गेनाइजेशन दे आर वर्किंग ऑन दीज लाइन्स। म्यूचुअल एड एग्रीमेंट, एडीबी, वर्ल्ड बैंक, ये सारे इस पे सपोर्ट करते हैं। Public information and education. Government is continue to sensitize people and they are taking lot of initiative to sensitize community. देन लीगल एंड इंस्टीट्यूशनल मैकेनिज्म। थोड़ा सा मैं आपको सेंडेई फ्रेमवर्क के बारे में बताना चाहूंगी। इन दिस सेंडेई फ्रेमवर्क इट इज इम्प्लीमेंटेड सिंस 2015 टू 2030। इस फ्रेमवर्क का नाम सेंडेई इसलिए पड़ा क्योंकि ये सेंडेई जापान में सारे वर्ल्ड लीडर्स दे केम फॉरवर्ड एंड दे हैव साइंड द ट्रीटी, एंड अंडर दैट ट्रीटी देयर इज अ 4 priority criteria. The first criteria is understanding disaster risk. हर कंट्री को पता होना चाहिए कि उसके पास कौन से डिजास्टर आ सकते हैं और कौन सा क्या क्या रिस्क है। स्ट्रेंथनिंग डिजास्टर रिस्क गवर्नेंस टू मैनेजिंग डिजास्टर रिस्क, इन्वेस्टिंग in disaster risk reduction for resilience, enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and to build back better in recovery, रिहेबिलिटेशन एंड रिकंस्ट्रक्शन। मैंने आपको बता दिया रिकवरी क्या है, रिहेबिलिटेशन क्या है और रिकंस्ट्रक्शन क्या है। जब ये तीनों चीजें प्रॉपरली वर्कआउट हो जाएगी तो दैट प्लेस विल बी बेटर देन यस्टरडे। So the objectives, it will be of too much detail and because of paucity of time, let's move ahead. A little information about the level of disaster. तो इसमें 3 लेवल्स होते हैं, लेवल L1, L2 एंड L3। तो L1 किसको कहते हैं? L1 हम उसको कहते हैं कि जब लेवल ऑफ डिजास्टर दैट कैन बी मैनेज्ड विद इन द कैपेबिलिटी एंड रिसोर्सेस एट द डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल। डिस्ट्रिक्ट के पास जो रिसोर्सेस हैं उससे वो डिजास्टर मैनेज हो जाता है तो उसको कहते हैं L1। L2 अगर डिस्ट्रिक्ट से मैनेज नहीं होता, उसको स्टेट की और सेंटर की जरूरत पड़ती है, दैट इज कॉल्ड L2। और L3 जब पूरा हमारा कंट्री मिलकर भी उस डिजास्टर को नहीं मैनेज कर पाता और हमें दूसरे कंट्री की जरूरत पड़ती है तो दैट इज L3। अब हम आते हैं इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क पे। तो व्हाट इज द इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क, या ऐसा क्या फ्रेमवर्क है जिसके बेस पे हमारा देश काम करता है किसी भी डिजास्टर को मैनेज करने के लिए। तो नेशनल लेवल पे देयर इज अ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स एंड अंडर विच देयर इज NDMA, नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी, और NIDM, नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट, जो मैंने आपको इनिशियली अपने सेशन के स्टार्टिंग में बताया था। और उसके बाद ये जो है कैबिनेट कमेटी ऑन सिक्योरिटी, नेशनल क्राइसिस मैनेजमेंट कमेटी और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट एंड यूनियन टेरिटरीज, They are supporting NDMA and NIDM, and apart from that, armed forces and all the paramilitary forces and different state-wise forces, they are also supporting to manage the disaster. The first one is Cabinet Committee, which is a Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, Minister of Finance, Minister of Home Affairs, and Minister of External Affairs. National Crisis Management Committee. Just a second. इसमें कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी, सेक्रेटरीज ऑफ मिनिस्ट्री, डिपार्टमेंट एंड एजेंसीज विद द स्पेसिफिक डीएम रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी। फिर आता है आपका नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी, देन नेशनल एग्जीक्यूटिव कमेटी और नेशनल डिजास्टर रिस्पॉन्स फोर्स। ये जो फोर्स है वो स्पेशली बनाया गया है, इसमें जो ऑफिसर्स हैं वो सारे पैरामिलिट्री फोर्सेस के हैं। ऑल ओवर इंडिया देयर इज 8 बटालियंस, और 8 बटालियंस पे दीज पीपल दे आर फुली इक्विप्ड with the infrastructure, with the equipments, with the training, और कहीं पे भी डिजास्टर होता है तो NDRF officers can reach to the point as soon as possible. फिर यहाँ पे अगर आप देखें तो आप देखिए आपको दिखाई देगा बायोलॉजिकल डिजास्टर। कुछ डिजास्टर हैं जो डिफरेंट डिपार्टमेंट्स को इनिशिएट किए गए हैं या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी दी गई है अपार्ट फ्रॉम ऑल दीज। तो बायोलॉजिकल डिजास्टर है, दैट इज मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ हेल्थ एंड फैमिली वेलफेयर इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल। केमिकल एंड इंडस्ट्रियल डिजास्टर के लिए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट, फॉरेस्ट, सैंड, क्लाइमेट चेंज, दे आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल। सिविल एविएशन के लिए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सिविल एविएशन, साइक्लोन, टॉर्नेडो, सुनामी, earthquake and flood, for all this ministry of earth science, drought, hailstorm, cold waves, frost and pest attack, for that ministry of agriculture and farmers. Forest fire, again ministry of environment, forest and climate change. For the landslide, ministry of mines. Avalanche, ministry of defense. Nuclear and radiological emergency, for that department of atomic energy. Rail accident, ministry of railway. Road accident, ministry of road transport and highway. Urban flood, ministry of urban development. So if the state level you see, there is a state disaster management authority, and the authority इसका जो चीफ होता है वो स्टेट का गवर्नर होता है, साथ में उनके पास पूरे जो एग्जीक्यूटिव चीफ सेक्रेटरी और दूसरे सीनियर ऑफिसर्स होते हैं वो मिलकर एग्जीक्यूटिव कमेटी बनाते हैं, और देन दे अप्रोच टू डिस्ट्रिक्ट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी। एंड व्हेन अगर आप डिस्ट्रिक्ट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी के पास जाते हैं तो वहाँ पे जो कलेक्टर होता है वो रिस्पॉन्सिबल होता है, और जब वो विलेज में जाते हैं तो वो पंचायत जो लोग होते हैं उनके थ्रू। तो ऐसे जो भी पॉलिसी बनती है वो NDMA में बनती है, और इस तरह से वहां से SDMA, DDMA और विलेज लेवल, देन द कम्युनिटी, इस तरह से वो ट्रिकल डाउन होकर हम तक पहुंचती है। तो दीज आर द इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क। एंड स्टेट लेवल में द सेम कोऑर्डिनेशन, प्रिपेयर्डनेस एंड रिसोर्स मोबिलाइजेशन पे वो काम करते हैं। अगर कोऑर्डिनेट करना है तो क्रूशियल रोल एज कोऑर्डिनेट, क्योंकि इसमें उनको अपने अपर सीनियर ऑफिसर्स को और एट द सेम टाइम अपने डिस्ट्रिक्ट के लोगों को दोनों के साथ कोऑर्डिनेट करना पड़ता है। प्रिपेयर्डनेस, एडवांस वार्निंग, एडवांस मैनेजमेंट प्लानिंग, एडवांस रिसोर्स इन्वेंटरीज, रिसोर्स मोबिलाइजेशन, ये सारी चीजें आती हैं। देन सम इम्पोर्टेंट इंटरनेशनल एजेंसीज जो कि डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट में काम करती है, तो इसमें 4 कैटेगरीज में इनको डिवाइड किया है। पहली कैटेगरीज है एजेंसीज ऑफ द UN। कौन सी UN एजेंसीज हैं जो डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट में काम करती है? यूनाइटेड नेशंस एजेंसी विद सपोर्ट रोल इन डिजास्टर मिटिगेशन। And the third category is major international agencies outside the UN system, जो UN से बाहर है, but they are international agencies. And the fourth category is national bodies assisting overseas. Right? So now non-governmental organization, there are so many NGOs, they are working in this line to create awareness, to provide food, to provide जैसे अभी लास्ट टाइम जो सेकेंड वेव हुआ था तो बहुत सारे एनजीओज ने उन्होंने कॉन्सेंट्रेटर का भी लंगर लगा दिया था, या जहाँ पर ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर का जो भी पेशेंट जिनको रिक्वायर्ड है और वो बाय नहीं कर सकते हैं वो वहां जाएं और ऑक्सीजन लेवल अपना प्रॉपर करके अगेन दे गो बैक। तो इस तरह से बहुत सारी एनजीओज थी जो फूड प्रोवाइड करती थी और बहुत सारी हेल्प करती थी। तो काफ़ी एनजीओज हैं जो इस लाइन में काम करती हैं। इसके अलावा लोकल ऑक्यूपेशन ग्रुप RWS, they are also supporting local resident association, religious body. They also came forward to support disaster management, educational institutions, Indian Red Cross Society. It is an international organization. जब वो रेड क्रॉस सोसाइटी इंडिया में काम करती है तो उसको बोलते हैं इंडियन रेड क्रॉस सोसाइटी। इस तरह से अगर वो डिफरेंट डिफरेंट कंट्रीज में करती है तो उसे हम डिफरेंट कंट्री के नाम से जानते हैं, जैसे स्पेनिश रेड क्रॉस, जर्मन रेड क्रॉस, इटालियन रेड क्रॉस, लाइक दैट। Apart from that, fire officers, police and paramilitary forces, civil defense and home guard, armed forces, ex-service personnel, public sector undertaking and private sectors. इसमें जो सिविल डिफेंस है, they are really a very strong force. They are working in disaster. कहीं पे भी डिजास्टर होता है, स्पेशली मैंने सुना है कि साउथ में अगर डिजास्टर होता है तो सबसे पहले विदिन 3 मिनट एक सिविल डिफेंस का ऑफिसर वहां पर रेस्क्यू करने या सपोर्ट करने के लिए पहुंच जाता है। Then there are some Government of India NGO Disaster Preparedness and Response Committee. This committee has been made by the government. और इसमें कौन से organizations आती हैं? They are World Vision of India, SOS Children's Village India, Ramakrishna Mission, Plan International, Oxfam India, Red Cross, Catholic Relief Service, Voluntary Health Association of India, Action Aid, Action for Food Production and Indo-German Social Service Society. इसके अलावा भी बहुत सारी है, but I have just named all these. Then agencies of the UN. UN की कौन सी एजेंसीज हैं जो डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट को सपोर्ट करती हैं? दैट इज द नंबर 1 इज फूड एंड एग्रीकल्चर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, United Nations Center for Human Settlement, that is UNHCR, United Nations Development Program, UNDP, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, which is known as UNESCO. UN agency with support role in disaster management. So for that, United Nations Center for Regional Development, Regional Disaster Prevention Unit, that is known as RDPU, United Nations Environment Program, then major international agencies outside the UN system. UN से बाहर जो एजेंसीज हैं वो हैं एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक मनीला, एशियन डिजास्टर प्रिपेयरनेस सेंटर, द हेड ऑफिस इज इन बैंकॉक, यूरोपियन कम्युनिटी ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ऑफिस, इंटरनेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट फॉर एनवायरनमेंट एंड डेवलपमेंट, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फॉर इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन इन डेवलपमेंट, वर्ल्ड बैंक एंड रेड क्रॉस सोसाइटी. National bodies who are assisting overseas. They are the 2 Overseas Development Administration, ODA UK, Office for Foreign Assistance. Then international organization, this one is very, very important. This international organization have been made in the year of 1999 with the 2 objectives. One is the international strategy for disaster reduction. क्योंकि कहते हैं ना कि डिजास्टर नेवर नोज बाउंड्रीज. डिजास्टर कभी भी ये नहीं कहेगा कि मैं सिर्फ इंडिया को स्ट्रक करूंगा या मैं सिर्फ नेबरिंग कंट्री को स्ट्रक करूंगा और इंडिया को नहीं करूंगा. उसको आना है वो कहीं भी आएगा. अर्थक्वेक आएगा उससे नेपाल भी अफेक्टेड होगा, इंडिया भी होगा, पाकिस्तान भी होगा और चाइना भी होगा. इट ऑल डिपेंड्स. कहीं कभी कभी ऐसी जगह पे आ जाता है. तो दैट इज वाई दे बिल्ट अ इंटरनेशनल स्ट्रैटेजी फॉर डिजास्टर रिडक्शन. The second objective is the core area of work include ensuring disaster risk reduction is applied to climate change adoption, increasing investment for DRR, building disaster resilient cities, school, hospitals, and strengthening the international system for DRR. So nowadays, every disaster, there the concept is changing. Earlier, the disaster was known as the natural and the man-made disaster, but now the people and the scientists, they are saying that the all disaster that is man-made disaster. For every disaster, human are responsible, and they are now connecting all this disaster to the climate change. जो भी क्लाइमेट चेंज हो रहा है वो हमारी एक्टिविटीज की वजह से हो रहा है. वी आर एक्सप्लॉइटिंग अवर एनवायरमेंट, वी आर overusing our resources. That is why climate change is happening, carbon emission is increasing. So all these we are the responsible. So that is why now the new concept is that is known as sustainable development goal. So for that, now government is requesting that individually, whatever the thing, whatever the efforts we can put to reduce the climate change, we have to do. उसमें एक सिंपल सा स्लोगन है कि आप प्लास्टिक को कम यूज करिए, आप वेस्ट को इधर उधर थ्रो नहीं करिए, पानी को आप वेस्ट ना करें, पानी को प्रॉपरली उसको यूज किए. देयर आर सो मच स्मॉल स्मॉल थिंग विच एवरीबडी कैन adopt, and we can support, align ourselves with the sustainable development goal and to support to stop the climate change. With this, I think आप लोगों को काफी अच्छे से मैंने बता दिया है कि क्या हमारे पास इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क है और किस तरह से जब भी कोई डिजास्टर आता है तो इंडिया किस तरह से उसको मैनेज करती है इन इंडिया लेवल पे और फॉरेन कंट्रीज के साथ भी एसोसिएट होके टिल विलेज लेवल, टॉप लेवल से लेके विलेज लेवल तक किस तरह से मैनेज किया जाता है. डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट साइकिल में मैंने आपको बताया कि किस किस फेज में पूरा किस कॉन्सेप्ट के साथ पूरा वर्ल्ड काम करता है. दैट इज नोन एज डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट साइकिल. इस टाइम में हमने क्या एक्शन लेना है, डिजास्टर स्ट्रक हो गया तो हमने क्या एक्शन लेना है, और आफ्टर सर्टेन टाइम डिजास्टर के हमने क्या एक्शन लेना है. तो ये सारी चीजें. With this, I would like to close my topic. If there is any question, please let me know. Nishi, is there any question on chat box?
Not yet. I request participants to please post their doubt in the chat box, or they can unmute themselves and ask it directly.
So I think now let's go on. If any queries. So I think our next speaker, let's move to next speaker. Yeah. Hello. ठीक है. So she is joining in 2 minutes. By the time what are the development, yeah, any question, yeah, any doubt you can ask. अगर सेशन इंटरेक्टिव हो तो अच्छा लगता है, नहीं तो वन साइड बोलते बोलते तो बड़ा मुश्किल होता है. सुजया, यू हैव एनी डाउट? आई एम नॉट, मैं मुझे सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. यू आर नॉट ऑडिबल.
May I, if
Yeah,
please,
sure,
madam?
sure.
Ma'am, you mentioned about the climate change adoption investment for DRR and this disaster resilient cities and all.
Yeah.
Means the government is already working so much on these areas, and if I'm not wrong, NIDM in a country like India is also working towards such a resilient society. How can the people at the community or at the or at the beaches, the seashores, the coastal areas of, say, for that matter, in India, how can they work collectively to develop such a resilient society? The coastal areas for that.
Yes, yes. Nowadays, government has again initiated for the coastal resilience. If they have take the example from the Japan, they have created all over the very high sea wall, which is near about 40 feet. But unfortunately, that tsunami that which hit to Japan that reaches above the 40 feet height. But if you look at the in India, there is a tree which is known as mangrove tree. So they are planting all over the coast. So if any tsunami or anything comes, it should not directly impact it to community. We can जो उसका strength होगा वो काफी कम हो जाएगा. So that is there. They have formulated a separate department which is known as the coastal. The head office is there in the Vasant Vihar, and they are also doing a lot of research so that because of these climate change or other disaster, their coastal thing should not be structure of coastals, or you can say the sea line of coast should not be changed, and to remain those things as it is, they are taking several initiatives. That is why if you go to Vishakhapatnam, they have totally restricted to their coastlines. There is no commercial activities. You have to just go, sit and come back. At the same way, if you go on the Mumbai, it's totally commercial. So such type of initiative, different state governments they are taking, and there are a lot of initiatives which has been initiated by the center also. I think I have answered your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Much helpful. Much helpful. We'll definitely look forward for the other discussion and to learn from.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Girdhar, for making participants understand the disaster cycle and legal and institutional mechanisms so wonderfully. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a minute. I'm stop sharing. Yeah. Tanushri is here, so please.
Yes. And now moving toward the last session of the day, I now invite Ms. Tanushri Verma to talk on the topic Hazard, Vulnerability, Capacity and Risk Assessment in School Tools and Techniques. Ms. Verma is currently working with Zone 4 Solutions and has 19 years of experience in the field of disaster risk reduction, especially in community-based disaster risk reduction, working extensively in the capacity of policy development, program planning, capacity building, training and documentation, women empowerment, and gender mainstreaming. I welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Nishi. Can I get the rights to share the screen, please?
Nishi, can you do that? Yeah, should I ask?
Ma'am, you have got it, ma'am.
Yeah.
I was just listening to the one of the query being raised by audience or participant present here of a role of the community and how community are getting sensitized towards risk reduction process. We talk so much about risk reduction. I could see Dr. Mukta was talking about various international framework and all. So many initiative has been taken to mainstream community in disaster risk reduction process. Apart from the government intervention, which has been taken at international level or national level, government has adapted those platforms or declarations which has been taken at global and international level. And then it is now percolating through state or district disaster management authority up to the community, as Dr. Mukta has also emphasized on that fact. And participatory approach is one of the important aspect of community-based disaster risk reduction, because all the process which we are doing for the community is for them, and they should own this process. So just wanted to add to what the query was made by some audience. So today I was assigned with the topic of hazard vulnerability capacity risk assessment in school tools and techniques. So this is little technical topic. So before initiating, as introduced by Nidhi, I am Tanushree Verma and currently associated with Zone for Solution as research and training head and largely working in the field of disaster risk reduction from 2006. So I think, let me take it into the presentation mode. Yes. So when we talk about schools or educational institution and their involvement in disaster risk reduction process, why this is required. So there are some points which I have made on the screen that why we need to involve educational institution in disaster risk reduction process. Schools are also one of the communities. Since in India, if we consider, then 32% population are those who are going to school or who are attending schools, and their safety is very important, even during the COVID or during the normal time when they generally used to go to school. So how the building, the structural or non-structural part are safe enough to provide them a safer learning environment. That is one. So and with these schools, the young generation which are coming out of this school, they can play an important role as a change agent of the society. They can become a role model or contribute to the society betterment. And they have a huge capacity to, contribute to the process of sustainable development. We talk about so many things of so many social issues, not only the school safety, not only the disaster management. In any social sector they can contribute. They have huge potential. So that potential need to be garnished properly, and that need to be diverted in correct direction. That's why we need educational institute to be part of disaster risk reduction process. And when you go to universities and all, at that level, educational institute can contribute to research and development in the field of disaster. New studies could take place with their support and guidance of academician present there. So educational institute have a lot of role in disaster risk reduction. That's why Government of India during the Asian Ministerial Conference in 2016, through that conference, Prime Minister of India, Honorable Prime Minister of India, announced a 10-point agenda, and one of the agenda was development of network of university who can promote disaster risk reduction institutes, who can integrate disaster risk reduction institutes or related concept in various aspects of the society. So a network of universities is also getting developed, and through that process, students are getting aware or trained about the disaster risk reduction skills. So that's why educational institute or school safety is very important. So second slide is just, I know that this might have got covered. Disaster, when we talk about disaster, it's massive loss of life, livelihood and property. It disrupts our normal life, affect large number of people and require external support. So the condition is such that where we need external support, that condition is called disaster. Generally, when we are able to cope any accident or incident around us as a family, as a society, as a neighborhood, then that is not a disaster. That is certainly hazardous and can be disastrous for one family or one person, but it is not disaster per se in government term. So disaster is something which affect large number of people. Like we are just, facing this pandemic COVID-19. So this is a global catastrophe. Now it is a global disaster which we are facing currently. So with this slide, it's very clear that it is unpredictable, urgent, unfamiliar, uncertain, and it's very speed is very high, and threat is also very high. So that condition is called disaster. In simple term, we can define disaster as a hazard causing heavy loss of life, property, and livelihood. And we can now connect it to any disaster. If you'll take a be it tsunami, be it earthquake, be it COVID, these three phenomena are very common in any disaster. That's why it is a disastrous situation. So coming to today's topic, it's largely the tools and techniques for disaster risk reduction, but hazard, vulnerability, capacity, and risk. So first, we should, I think, some basic understanding of this 4 concept is very important to move ahead. So hazard is any physical event happening around us which has potential to trigger any disaster. If not cope well, then it become a disaster. Like even like if you see the 3 phases of COVID, then the virus was everywhere. That was hazard. But if we'll get vaccinated, or if we'll do the basic protocol, adapt to the basic protocol of this thing, COVID-19, we will be able to minimize the impact of that hazard upon us. Similarly, vulnerability is that the degree to which the community is susceptible to loss or damage. So vulnerability depends upon the fact that whether we have got vaccinated or not. If we have not got vaccinated, we are increasing our vulnerability. So vulnerability is a one thing which vary from place to place, person to person, even within the age, gender, and class. Like person who, in the case of fire, the person who can easily evacuate a able-bodied person can be less vulnerable, or can be less vulnerable to that particular hazard. But the person who are a special person, who are physically challenged, the old, the children, could be more vulnerable to that particular hazard. So in that case, if we will visualize a scene of a school, children are more vulnerable to the fire hazard. So vulnerability differ from place to place, even person, and it's also depend upon our knowledge, our skill, how we are able to respond to particular kind of disaster hazard. That also depend, that also increase or decrease our vulnerability. Similarly, capacity is the resource, skills of the community, which help us to resist the impact of that particular hazard. And risk is, in disaster term, is the potential disaster losses which might happen if disaster happen, if we get stuck in disaster. So which could occur to a particular community or society over some specified future time period. So it's like which might happen if we not perform some basic adaptation method, or mitigation method, or preparedness method. So these are the 4 basic definition or concept, I could say, that is essential to understand before we go for tools and techniques of disaster management or hazard vulnerability, capacity, and risk. So vulnerability, as I discussed earlier, can be defined as a diminished capacity of an individual or group to anticipate or cope with, resist, recover from the impact of natural or man-made hazard. The concept is relative and dynamic. Vulnerability is more often associated with poverty, as we could see during the COVID also. Migrants were more vulnerable. It was not only the COVID hazard. It was not only the health hazard. It was also the economic hazard. So they were more vulnerable. They were on road. In spite of the fact there was a complete lockdown, they could not help it. So they were more vulnerable. But it is not only poverty. Other factors also enhance or decrease our vulnerability. Like a student, who were at home and doing online classes, they are more vulnerable to psychosocial hazard nowadays. So it depends upon the person to person and situation also. So it's vary. So people differ in their exposure, as I told, like to risk as a result of their social group, gender, ethnic, and other identity. The reverse side of coin is the capacity, which can be described as a resource available around us, household community to cope with the threat or resist the impact of the any hazard. So how do we counter vulnerability? So we counter vulnerability by reduce the impact of hazard through mitigation, reduction, and warning or preparedness. So these are the 4 ways through which we can minimize the impact of any vulnerability. Like for the example, the cyclone which struck in 1998 in Odisha, there was loss of 10,000 life. A same level of cyclone filing happened in 2014, and then the recurring it is happening every year or two. So the loss of life is like zero in that whole cyclone. After 2014, we have noticed in various cyclones. So why that is happening? That is happening because people are now more prepared, more aware of the various hazard around that. Government is more prepared. Institutional structure is there to inform or to give early warning to the people. There is a set multi-hazard cyclone center has came up where people are getting shelter after getting evacuated. So many efforts has been done, and it is not only one stakeholder in disaster management. When we talk about disaster management, it is not just one government or one department which is working. It is a complete coordination between various other departments and people who are at the center of disaster risk reduction process, because the whole approach is people-centric approach. Because once disasters strike, it's the community which get affected a lot, and if they are not prepared, the loss will be very high. So it's all the whole institutional structure, the way it is getting dealt with is very, very people-centric. So the approach is very people-centric. So even the capacity building process and not everything has been developed and defined in view of building the skills of the community at large. So building capacity to withstand and cope with the hazard is one. Through that, we can also minimize the vulnerability. Tackling the root cause of vulnerability. These are the important factors like poverty, poor governance sometimes. Also enhance the vulnerability. Discrimination we have seen like during the distribution of relief material. Children's lined up at the last. So we should give a specific emphasis on the children. Then the distribution of material, women get the at last, old. So those special people have a special need. So their need should be catered in a specific manner. So specific need of each age group or gender may be considered while doing policy making. So that's why governance is also very important. So this inequality, inadequate access to the resources can get minimized, and livelihood certainly enhance our vulnerability. Poor have the people who are poor, they have poor purchasing power and poor access to resource, knowledge, and services. So they naturally become vulnerable to various hazard. So if you'll see, this is just one slide on the vulnerability profile of the various natural disasters in India. Climate change is adding to the existing hazard. It is enhancing the frequency and intensity of hazard. Sea level rise posing more threat of to coastal region in terms of cyclonic flood or cyclone, change in monsoon leading to uneven pattern of rainfall. The frequency, time, intensity is getting very high. So glacier melting, change in humidity. So there are very many other adverse impact of changing climate, heat wave, cold wave. So this is adding, or there was one saying that disasters are collaborating. So this is adding to the existing disaster. Disasters are collaborating, so we also need to collaborate so that we can bounce back properly in effective manner. So this is actually my topic for today, the HRBA. And HRBA is one of the aspect of whole school disaster management plan. It is one of the chapter and very important part of school disaster management plan, because HRBA help us to identify or diagnose the symptoms, basically. Then only the treatment would happen. So HRV help us to diagnose the symptoms of the disease or in disaster, what are the symptoms of various hazard. So then only we can prepare ourselves. So in whole school disaster management plan component, if you see hazard identification, safety assessment, and response plan. So hazard identification and safety assessment is before disaster. Response plan is when disaster strike, what would you do? So these are the sections of disaster management plan. So now we'll see in terms of school, how schools will develop a disaster management plan. However, it is common across all the sectors. If you'll do it for community, if you'll do it for resident welfare association, the process would be common only, HRBA process. So largely the hazard identification, there are two different type of hazard where we do the assessment. One is the structural assessment, one is the non-structural assessment. Safety assessment, and then resource inventory. So response plan I will not cover. It's like evacuation plan and all we make in that. So that is a separate chapter, but I'll mostly concentrate on the first part, the structural assessment, non-structural, and the resource inventory which is needed. So while preparing a plan, selected school staff need to try to identify the various hazard school is exposed to. And accordingly, prevention and mitigation or response plan will be developed. So what are those hazards? Sometimes sitting at in a school, you can identify what are those hazards. Some are the natural hazard, which is naturally you are vulnerable to if you are located at nearby some seaside, or if you are located at some those area which are vulnerable to industrial area, which are vulnerable to fire hazard. So some are the natural or man-made hazard which are to which school is vulnerable. But what are those other hazards and how to do that assessment, hazard risk vulnerability assessment? So tools and techniques, actually it's a very technical term, tools and techniques of HRBA, but the process is not that technical. It's a process of gathering information through informal discussion for need assessment, planning, implementation, and monitoring also. How your plan, if your plan is effective or not, if the plan you have made for disaster management is effective or not, that will also be done through these tools and techniques. So there are various tools and techniques available to carry out HRBA at various levels, including in schools. Some are primary tools of and technique of HRBA, and some are secondary.
एक मिनट दिखाओ, निकालना किसको क्या छुट्टी है?
Some mics are on, I feel. I request everyone to switch off your mic, please. And some are secondary tools and techniques. So what are those primary tools and techniques? Let us first have a look on the tools and techniques, and then we'll see how we can do this hazard and vulnerability risk assessment. So the primary tools support in data gathering, which are first-hand for a particular school. In a locality, if there are 5 schools, all 5 schools will be vulnerable to one natural hazard, which could be earthquake, if it is falling in zone 4, earthquake zone 4. But if we go to individual school, we will be able to identify that some particular location of that school is vulnerable to fire hazard. Some particular location of that school could be vulnerable to any chemical hazard if chemistry labs are not maintained properly. So primary tools help us to get the first-hand data, and secondary tools support in gathering the data from some secondary source like desk review and all. So primary tool could be interview, open-ended interview with the teachers, with principals, with the student themselves, questionnaires, focus group discussion, formal meeting. So these are the primary tools and secondary tools of data collection or hazard and identification. After that, we try to do hazard identification through some diagrammatic technique also. There is seasonal or historical diagram, which we also through which we try to understand the trend of any trend or frequency of occurrence of any hazard. And then seasonal calendar give us understanding the time or occurrence of a particular hazard. Historical diagram help us to understand the frequency, and then ranking and scoring also of the problem, preference, and wealth ranking can be done. So we'll now see how that can be done. One is hazard hunt exercise. We constitute a team of people from the school itself, and we just visit the complete school from the main gate to each of the class, including toilets and all, everywhere we visit, and we just through our eyes try to, that is rapid visual screening of the school eyes. We try to see the whole school through the lens of hazard. So discussion on potential hazard that a school can face, non-structural assessment practically done by the expert team, but school can also help in that assessment. Structural assessment, identification of hazard outside the school campus. Like if school is located at the junction of some major red light where a lot of vehicles are like crossing, or industrial area, or some open drain nearby some open drain. So those things enhance the vulnerability of a school, and so exposure, this lead to more exposure of children to probable hazard. So database of past disaster, accident, which have affected the school, identification of vulnerable school, locations within the school. So what could be that? So let us see. So this is one process of hazard assessment. We try to develop a seasonal calendar. So this has been done for one of the school of Delhi. So it can be done for anyone, any school. So this is, the school can list the number of hazard that it may experience in the past. It may have experienced in the past and has fear that they can occur again in the future. The next step are to plot the frequency, seasonality, magnitude, intensity of the hazard. So the seasonal calendar could look like this. And this can be done by anybody in the school. So on the basis of that, we can also plot this hazard assessment matrix. Likewise, the frequency of hazard can be plotted against their intensity at a place, as it is placed below. Based on the frequency and intensity of hazard, it may be assessed on the basis of the low frequency, high intensity, high frequency, low intensity hazard. Some hazard may occur, the frequency is very high. The frequency of that hazard is very high, but loss is not less, because that hazard is happening when school is closed. I think people are getting me. Frequency and intensity, both are interconnected. So it will not, since the population, the students are not there in the school, so its intensity will be low. So that way, we will be able to develop this hazard assessment metric. The purpose of creating this metric, the most critical hazard to be planned for. Like during summer vacation, if heat wave is happening, and it is happening with very high frequency each year, but it cannot give, I mean, it's the loss of life, or the number of children affected from that would be very low, because the school is closed. So it's there is a connection between the frequency intensity matrix. So this matrix will be developed basis on that. So this is one very easy diagram which we also do with the community. We try to identify, it's a Venn diagram, we also call it chapati diagram. So we try to identify the intensity of any hazard on this plot when we do discussion with the community. Like if what is the intensity or frequency of earthquake, fire, and flood. Similarly, at a particular district level, if we want to see that which school is more vulnerable to which kind of hazard. So this plot can be developed based on the location of that particular school. So it's at a district level or at a cluster level, at a zonal level, like Western school, all the school located in the West Delhi want to get we want to put it in one paper for hazard and impact analysis matrix. So this is the way we can develop the hazard risk assessment matrix for various hazard, which may be an overall rating can also be done. That it is whether it is very high vulnerability hazard or high vulnerability or moderate or low. So this way we can develop the matrix to assess the frequency of and intensity of various hazard at a particular location or geographical location. We also do transit walk when we talk about community in rural areas or any urban areas also, like our RWA. We walk from one side to another side. We try to find out open area, the area which is more hazardous, where we the area which is low lying towards the river. So transit walk help us to map the social vulnerability risk and resources also. The area which is a high-rise area where we can evacuate and keep ask people to reach if any hazard like tsunami or cyclone is happening. So this is largely for the rural community. Now we come to the vulnerability assessment. A hazard cannot do damage without vulnerability, and hence it is critical to assess the vulnerability. Vulnerability represents the weakness of our community, like how less prepared we are. So that is vulnerability, weakness of the community, which can be attributed to its exposure by being located at a certain place, to its various demographic, social, economic character that enhance its likelihood and to experience damage. Now, if you'll see, this is one of the recent school, we have prepared a school disaster management plan. So this will certainly enhance the structural vulnerability. If you see the photograph 1. Now the photograph 2, though the school has sand bucket, this is before COVID. This picture is before COVID. Though the school has sand bucket, but that sand is wet, so it will not work during the fire. So this is another kind of vulnerability. Though we have enhanced our capacity, we kept the sand bucket, but the sand is wet. So these things we have to, and here we don't need any expert to mitigate this thing. This can be done by me also, and anybody, even a child can, a school child who is 6th class onward can do this on the guidance of any teacher. So we do not actually see these kind of risk is happening around us. We are enhancing our risk. So with this we are enhancing our risk. So vulnerability assessment can be done through this plot. Like we can divide the age group 0 to 4, 14 to 30, 30 to 45. And then on the other side, since vulnerability is one of the important factor of vulnerability is poverty. So on the other side, it's like below poverty line, low income, medium income, very high income. And then we can plot it. Now, during the COVID-19, we are facing it from last almost 2 years in India. We have seen that many people have, many children has dropped out this school. So those children in the rural area, who were going to school only to have some midday meal and some studies, now their parents do not find it useful to continue their school. They are now become one of the source of generating livelihood or economic support to their family. So children are dropping out. In urban areas, those family who can afford to keep a student in school, in private school, they are keeping. Those who have lost their job, they are shifting it to the government school. And in the government school, those children who were belonging to low income group, now their parents finding it no more useful because economy is certainly going down, the family level economy. So now they also started supporting in economic or livelihood generation of the family. So this way we can connect the poverty, the age to the vulnerability assessment. So what is the level of vulnerability? If it is red, it is very unacceptable. It is orange, it is high. If it is yellow, it is medium, and it is blue, then low. So this way we can connect, and this is the way of doing the vulnerability assessment of any school, any community, any unit you take. And last is the risk profiling. So risk is what? Risk, like people are aware that wearing the mask in public is very important. But I don't want to wear the mask when I'm talking to someone. So what is that? That is like I am aware that how exposed I am while talking for COVID-19 without mask, but then also I am enhancing my risk by not wearing mask. So it's depend that whether I am going to adapt myself to particular situation or not with the changing scenario of hazard, or adaptation and mitigation will lead to the minimizing the impact of hazard, or I want to move with the same the normal life, the way I used to do it before COVID-19. So it also depends that how I am going to. So it's the individual responsibility also to adapt or mitigate. Similarly, I have seen in many schools, fire extinguishers are there. Before COVID, we used to have a lot of school disaster management related program and training. Fire extinguishers are there. And if you look at any fire extinguisher, how to operate that fire extinguisher, all the things related to the process and all are written on that fire extinguisher, the type of fire extinguisher. But whenever I'll ask before the training program that whether anybody know about how to operate this extinguisher, I generally get one or two hand raised that they know. So it's like people do not want to learn because there is a mentality that nothing will happen. So it's a good that we are maintaining that positivity in our mind, but we should learn the things in case of any kind of accident. We will be able to save ourselves and our children also at the school. So some risks are acceptable. These are the risks that are accepted by the community and tend to little or no or much effect on a regular functioning of the community, or are rare in occurrence. For example, a river protection that is built to withstand 100 years flooding implies that risk is acceptable to the community for the event exceeding that magnitude. Tolerable risk. These risks affect the community but can be managed without much loss, like household fire. The risk which I was also talking earlier also before in the initial part of my discussion. Undesirable risk, they are the serious impact. They have the serious impact of the community and its course of action. So for example, like excessive use of pesticide. So we are enhancing our risk. So it cannot be considered. So intolerable risk, they cause disaster leading to substantial or a total breakdown of the community system, like earthquake, flooding of very high magnitude. Currently, the so-called third wave of the COVID-19, which had just struck to us. So time and again, government, everybody is like saying this thing or announcing that we should do this protocol, adapt to this protocol. But still, we could not do that. And we are again in the same cycle of lockdown, unlockdown. So it's depend upon us and that how we are going to adapt to a particular situation or minimize our risk. So as I told earlier, like it's all the people-centric approach, and it's depend upon the people that how they are going to learn it. Many trainings program, government is one, but many other NGOs and international organizations are doing a lot of intervention in the field of disaster risk reduction. I have seen from last 15 years. So it's depend upon the people how they are going to adapt to a particular situation. I think I'm done. This is one school disaster management. When we talk of a school disaster management system, so in school disaster management, the district disaster management authority is one, which is at the district level. Under that, Department of Education work, and at a school level, principal is the head of the school disaster management committee, and principal is the incident command person at the school. Then we develop different kind of teams, warning and dissemination teams, fire safety team, first aid team, search and rescue team, evacuation team, and they got trained in these skills of search and rescue, evacuation, fire safety, so that at the time of any such kind of unforeseen situation, even though not many massive kind, but still the small one also, they could able to respond to that particular kind of hazard at school level itself. This is one evacuation map I'm placing because we are dealing with schools and we have prepared many school disaster management plan, conducted many trainings. So this is one evacuation map. And if you see in one map, this is one ground floor map I'm showing on the screen. If you see in one map, we have a nearby police station, fire station, various hospitals, and then other important numbers. So, and these are the self-glow map. Even if in the fire, when there is completely dark, people or the person residing in the school at that particular point of time will be able to see the evacuation route. So all the maps which we are developing now for the school disaster or any office which is closed from all sides should have self-glow map, because at the time of fire, it is very difficult to see or to get the exit route or evacuation route. Even the arrows should also be the self-glow map, self-glow arrow. So we should use self-glow map, and this is one such map I have placed on the screen. So if you see the whole disaster management cycle, we are here on the purple part now, blue part, and talking about the purple part. So we are doing basically preparedness to enhance our knowledge, so that we, especially talking about the mitigation measures, the structural and non-structural mitigation, so that we can reduce the impact of hazard. So whenever we will get to face this kind of hazard, our response will be better. So as I told in the initial part of my discussion, that community is the first responder, and if community are not prepared to respond, they are the ultimate sufferer. Only prepared community can stop a hazard to become a disaster. Ultimately, who is suffering? We all are suffering. We all are again got stuck to the home, right? So it's a community who is the ultimate sufferer, and we need to adapt to the situation. A prepared community, safe community, and moreover, those who are living in a community are better people to ask for the resources. If something would happen to my locality, I am the first person who will be able, who will respond to any, that kind of hazard. And I know that they just crossing the road, there is a fire station on the backside of my house. So local person can give in good knowledge about the various hazard, even the resources. So these are some of the glimpses of our training program, which we used to conduct before COVID at school. It was a very a beautiful environment before COVID, I must say, when we had normal life. So students used to participate, and Dr. Mukta also know very enthusiastically in all our initiative. So I wish to have same days back again. And thank you from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for covering very significant insights about hazard, vulnerability, capacity, and risk in school safety. I request participants, if you have any doubt, you can post in the chat area or you can directly unmute yourself and ask the doubt.
Very rightly pointed out, disasters are collaborating. A very new term, actually. I'm very surprised to hear this term. Disasters are collaborating, the floods are collaborating, the pandemics are collaborating. But how the department should collaborate, especially the state should collaborate with one another. We often hear the example of Orissa super cyclone and we take learning from that cyclone. But how about the experiences come from Bihar and Maharashtra? Every year the floods are taking place. Maharashtra, every year the people struggle with that heavy rain. Bihar, the international border with Nepal, every year the Kosi River get over flooded, and then the people from that area need to displace themselves from their native houses to a hilly terrain or to a terrain which are safer in that geography. How the department or the state should work with one another to develop a resilient or safe place for people to live in spite of knowing that this disaster has to happen. You rightly pointed out the community are the one who are the most vulnerable people. But community are helpless in this case. People don't want to suffer with heavy rain or with the road blockages and the drainage system over flooding. How they should work with the department.
So, Ma'am, shall I answer this question? Mukta ma'am?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Saurav, actually, your question is valid, but I want to just reiterate one fact that I have told, like shared this during the discussion also, that it's not one department which is working in disaster risk reduction process. And department has already collaborated on this. We have see, there are many parts of your question. One you mentioned that floods are happening every year in Bihar. So these are the recurring phenomena, and it is bound to happen naturally. You cannot stop any flow of of any river. So we cannot. What we can do, we can mitigate the impact. So I think in Bihar or Assam or Odisha, people are now got very much adapted, and even they mitigate also. Like I belong to Bihar. I have seen like before the onset of monsoon, everybody starts shifting the wooden furniture and all in the first floor, because there will be flooding for 1 or 2 days. So people have already adapted to those kind of recurring hazard which is happening every year. What is challenging? The new hazards which are coming up, like this COVID-19. We were not at all prepared for this. So it was very new to us. What was challenging? The tsunami which happened in 2004 for the first time. Community and government was not at all prepared for that or to respond to. So many institutions are coming up, and there's set structure of institution that you might have, in the course of discussion, you might have got to know. And very much community is part of, community is certainly ultimate sufferer, but community is part of planning process everywhere. In Odisha, in Assam, in Bihar, everywhere, community is one of the important part of disaster risk reduction process. So, I think I have answered your query.
Partially agreed, ma'am, but that require a very detailed discussion around us, but will not take much time. Well, one suggestion which I'd like to make here, especially for the people who have joined from the schools, you have shown one picture of a bucket with a muddy sand. You can't handle the fire if that happens in a school. Can we send a ready reckoner for the schools to refer, where they can look at their school premises uh, on a monthly or on a half yearly basis, that these buckets should be refilled with a dry sand. The plans should be reviewed after every, say, quarter or 6 month, or the plan should be looked
Saurabh,
after.
I think these kind of related district disaster management authority, even the national disaster management authority, whom I have worked recently, do issue time to time, and there is a detailed school disaster management plan guidelines 2016 Government of India NDMA website you can find, and it has everything related to the how to make a learning environment safer for the school. And as you talked about the various department, there are a set of 13 department at district level who are emergency support functionaries and who meet regularly under the chairman of SIP of District Disaster Management Authority. The district collector is the chairman of that authority. So all the department do work in coordination with each other. I think
Yeah, and it's mandatory for each school and every hospital and everyone that they have to rehearse themselves quarterly. That is
So
a
these
different
guidelines,
issue that people are not taking
I-
that much seriously. That is a different issue, but mandate is
oh,
that's what I am saying.
oh, oh. Okay. Thank
there.
you, thank you, thank you.
Any question? So should I expect from the teachers that they will look around and they will try to assess the risk and they'll try to reduce the risk? And I hope you all have understand how the school children, they are important to reduce the risk because they are the future of our nation. And if they will culminate this nature of safety, or you can say habit of safety, they will pass on to next generation. That is why it is very important that we should take care of our childrens. They are the future of our nation. Any question?
May I ask a question, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Sujata Ravindra Bargale. I'm a medical profession from Maharashtra, Pune.
Yeah.
It was very nice presentation and talk by all of three speakers. Just one question to Tanushree Verma, madam. The picture you shown of that school, disaster management. Just I want to know which school is this? There is a name, but from which place it is? I want to know.
If I think I am not supposed to disclose this, but that is from Surat. We did it just before this lockdown.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
So is there any you wanted to know the name? So just I wanted to know कि something is in your mind?
Is it
आपके माइंड में कुछ है या आप कुछ इस तरह से कुछ प्लान कर रहे हैं या कुछ ऐसा? You want support or something?
no? Just I want to because uh, I suppose that this question is to me only, doctor.
अच्छा.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
No. Is it you are asking to me, madam, or
आई एम आस्किंग टू यू कि आपके माइंड में कुछ था, आपने जो ये सवाल
but
पूछा तो कुछ और भी आपके माइंड में चल रहा था क्या?
no? She shown that picture, so I
आ-
was just curious to know that if there is any opportunity so that one can visit to that school and see how it is and can it be implemented to any other place. That's what.
It
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be implemented to any of the school, and we are doing it at various places. So if you want, then we can certainly help you out in that process. But a visit of a person with a disaster management expertise is required for the development of that kind of maps and all.
Okay. Thank you, madam.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Over to Nishi. Thank you, Tanushri, for your precious time.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sure the participants today would have gained a lot from the presentation and insights presented by our eminent speakers. We thank each one of you and request you to kindly join us tomorrow afternoon for new learnings. Have a great day ahead. And now we are calling off this meeting. Thank you again. See you all.
Yeah, so I am requesting again to be on time tomorrow at 3 p.m. See you.